All right, let's jump right in. Today's deep dive takes us on a bit of a historical road trip.
Oh, sounds interesting.
Yeah, we're going to be tracing the footsteps of the Melbourne Gold Rush, starting in, well, maybe a surprising spot, Blackburn.
Blackburn, huh? Not the first place that springs to mind when you think gold rush.
Exactly. But then we're winding our way through to, of course, Warrandyte. You know, our listeners sent in some really fascinating excerpts about this journey, about the impact of the gold rush. And I'm really curious to sort of peel back the layers, see what's hiding beneath the surface of these seemingly ordinary suburbs.
Yeah, what I find so intriguing about this particular route is how it reveals that the gold rush isn't just like a historical event. It's like this living thing that continues to shape the landscape, even the people, even today.
Okay, so first stop, Blackburn. Now, I know Blackburn today. Peaceful streets, family-friendly, it's got that kind of vibe. But I gotta say, it's kind of hard to picture it as part of this, bustling gold rush scene. Paint me a picture. What was Blackburn like back then?
Well, picture this. It's 1851, and news has just broken about gold being discovered in Warrandyte. So suddenly, boom! Blackburn's right on the edge of this rapidly expanding gold field. Instead of those quiet residential streets you mentioned, imagine dusty roads filled with prospectors, their wagons just overflowing with hopes and dreams.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a very different image. Which must have been a pretty exciting, probably chaotic time. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm curious about Warrandyte being that site of the first official gold discovery. Fill me in. What happened there?
Warrandyte is pretty significant, historically speaking. One of the excerpts you sent over actually mentions a guy named James Esmond. Seems like he was a pretty ordinary guy until, he stumbles upon gold in Warrandyte in 1851. And that discovery, that's what really set off what we call gold fever.
Gold fever, yeah.
It wasn't just Melbourne. This gripped the whole world. People from all walks of life. They abandoned everything, dropped their lives, flocked to Victoria, all hoping to strike it rich.
So it wasn't just about the gold itself. It was about this profound effect it had on people, their aspirations, what they thought was possible, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the impact of that gold fever, it was huge. Melbourne, before the gold rush, it was, a relatively small settlement. But almost overnight, it boomed, became one of the wealthiest cities in the world.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's incredible to think one single discovery could have this, ripple effect, changing, not just the fortunes of individuals, but the whole trajectory of a city's development.
Absolutely, and it wasn't just Melbourne itself that was transforming. As the gold rush gained momentum, settlements like Doncaster, for example, which was, right on the route to those gold fields, they played a crucial role in supporting this rapid growth.
The Doncaster, right? Known for its shopping centers today. Now, I can't imagine it was quite the same scene during the gold rush, though.
Yeah.
So, what was its role in all of this?
Doncaster, it wasn't actually on the goldfields themselves, but it became this really vital supply hub. You had farmers in the area suddenly finding themselves, right in the middle of this booming industry. They were providing the food, the resources, everything that this ever-growing population of miners needed.
Okay, so instead of rows of shops, picture sprawling farmland, the hillsides dotted with homesteads, and the roads just bustling with horse-drawn carts carrying supplies. Heading towards the goldfields.
Yeah, that's the picture. And speaking of those hills, they weren't just ideal for farming either. Their vantage point, it was actually perfect for surveying the land, planning new settlements. You sent over an excerpt from Dr. Weston Bates' book, Lucky City, and he actually talks about how important these hills were in those early stages of developing this whole region.
That's just amazing to think about, the landscape I drive through today. It actually played this vital role in shaping the region's history. I'm seeing things with a whole new perspective.
That's the beauty of exploring history. Makes you connect with your surroundings in a way that's, it's just more meaningful. And as we continue our journey, towards Warrandyte, that heart of that first gold discovery, we can see how the landscape itself tells a story of change. The Yarra River, for instance, it played this crucial role during the gold rush, but it continues to be this defining feature of the region even today.
The Yarra River, yeah. That's iconic, such a big part of Melbourne. But it must have had a much different kind of significance during the gold rush, right? What was its role in all of this?
The Yarra, it was the lifeblood of the goldfields. Provided water for drinking, washing. It was a way to transport goods, people. And of course, it was the primary source for panning for gold.
I can almost see those miners, hunched over the riverbanks, panning for gold, hopes and dreams, just swirling around with that muddy water.
Must have been a pretty intense scene, a lot of anticipation. And while you probably won't see many prospectors panning for gold today, you can still see remnants of that era in places like Warrandyte State Park. In your research, you mentioned this article from a local historical society. They say the park has preserved gold diggings and mining equipment.
Oh, that's fascinating. So even though the landscape has changed, those tangible links to that era, they're still there, like reminders of the people who walked these paths before us.
Exactly. And as we approach Warrandyte now, you'll see that this town, it might not be a bustling gold field anymore, but it still carries those echoes of its past.
So are we talking about a town frozen in time, like a living museum of the gold rush?
Yeah.
What should I be picturing as we arrive in Warrandyte?
Well, you won't find streets paved with gold, but what you will find is this really unique blend of modern life and beautifully preserved history. It might not have that grandeur of, say, Ballarat or Bendigo, those larger gold rush towns, but Warrandyte, it holds this special significance as the birthplace of Victoria's golden era.
Yeah, it's like the starting point of a journey, the place where it all began. I'm really eager to, learn more about this town, how it's managed to preserve its connection to the past.
And that's exactly what we'll explore as we delve deeper into Warrandyte's history.
But as we, virtually explore this town, what should we be looking for? Like, what are maybe those subtle hints that the gold rush is still kind of whispering through the streets of Warrandyte?
It's interesting. Warrandyte, it's not like one of those towns that's just frozen in time, desperately clinging to its past. It's very much alive, a vibrant community,
Right.
But it also embraces its history while, looking ahead to the future.
I'm curious about that, though. How can something that happened, over 150 years ago, still be relevant in a modern town, a thriving place like this?
Well, you mentioned something interesting in your research. Warrandyte's art scene. Apparently, the gold rush, it didn't just attract prospectors, it drew in artists, artisans, people who are inspired by that, energy and the stories of this new frontier. And it seems like that creative spirit, it really kind of took root. Warrandyte is still known for its thriving arts community today.
That's a cool connection. So it wasn't just gold being unearthed during that era. It was like this wellspring of creativity that's still flowing through the town.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The gold rush, it wasn't just about digging up riches from the earth. It was like this catalyst for a cultural and social transformation that still shapes Warrandyte's character.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how the past, it isn't separate from the present here. It's really woven into the fabric of this whole place.
As we explore Warrandyte, I'm struck by how much the town's identity seems tied to the Yarra River. We talked earlier about its practical importance during the gold rush, but it feels like it's more than just a geographical feature here, doesn't it?
Yeah, now that you mention it, there's this sense of tranquility about the river, a real beauty. It feels almost symbolic somehow.
Right. One of your excerpts, I think it was a local historian, they described the river as the soul of Warrandyte. And even though it's no longer crowded with prospectors, panning for gold, it still draws people to its banks. It's a place for recreation, for reflection, a constant reminder of the town's connection to nature.
It's like the river, it flows through time, doesn't it? Carrying those stories, the gold rush, and whispering them to anyone who'll listen.
I like that. A beautiful way to put it. Speaking of stories, though, remember that question we posed earlier? Was the gold rush really all about the gold?
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the romance of it all, picturing everyone striking it rich. But I think there's a deeper story there.
Definitely. You highlighted a passage in your research about the social impact of the gold rush. And while it did bring prosperity to some, it also created hardship. Inequality, the sudden influx of people, it led to overcrowding, disease, there were social tensions.
Okay, so the gold rush. Glittering on the surface, maybe, but definitely with its share of shadows.
Exactly. It's important to acknowledge those shadows, to remember that history, it's often this complex tapestry of triumph and tragedy woven together.
Yeah. I'm realizing now that the gold rush, it wasn't just a moment in time, it was this force that really shaped the essence of this entire region. The drive, the resilience, the spirit of adventure, those qualities, they seem to have been passed down through generations.
That's a really sharp observation. In a way, the gold rush is still happening, maybe not in the literal sense, but it's transformed into the spirit of innovation, a determination to build a better future. Look around, even in a small town like Warrandyte, that spirit's alive, in the businesses, community initiatives, the way people just embrace change and opportunity.
It's like the gold rush sparked this fire in people's hearts. What's the one key takeaway we should be carrying with us? What's the essence of this town that we hold on to?
I think it's the realization that even in the quietest corners of the world, history, it continues to resonate, shapes our landscape, our culture, even our very identity. And it reminds us that the past isn't just something to be observed, it's something to be learned from, cherished, even challenged.
I keep thinking about something you said earlier, about how history, it's not just about observing the past, it's about understanding how it shapes the present. How can we still see that legacy of the gold rush in the bigger picture of Melbourne today?
That's a really good question. It's easy to think of the gold rush as being, confined to those specific locations like Warrandyte, but its impact, it really spread out, transformed Melbourne in ways that we can still see today. Take Melbourne's reputation as this multicultural hub, that diversity. It has its roots in the gold rush.
Right. It wasn't just about attracting people from within Australia. The gold rush drew immigrants from all over the globe, each bringing their own cultures, languages, traditions, the whole mix.
Yeah, and it wasn't always a smooth transition either. You pointed out a section in your research that talked about those social tensions that arose from the sudden influx of people from so many different backgrounds. Competition for resources, cultural clashes, even discrimination. Those were part of the story too.
So the gold rush. It's a story of opportunity and progress, but it definitely had its darker side as well.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge that complexity, to really understand the full impact. It wasn't just about economics. It irreversibly changed the social fabric of Melbourne. I mean, before 1851, Melbourne was small, relatively homogenous, but the gold rush, with all those people pouring in from everywhere, it transformed it into that multicultural hub we see today.
Yeah, that's a really important point. It makes me think about those immigrants who arrived during that time, seeking their fortune in this completely new land. Their experiences, the struggles, the successes, they all help to shape the very character of this city.
You're exactly right. And that legacy extends beyond just cultural diversity, too. The gold rush also had this huge impact on Melbourne's physical landscape, especially its architecture.
Yeah.
You mentioned being fascinated by those grand Victorian-era buildings in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah. They're stunning. I always wondered how those ornate structures came to be.
Well, think about all the wealth that was generated by the gold rush. It fueled a massive construction boom. Architects, inspired by those grand European cities, they incorporated those elaborate designs, luxurious materials. They envisioned a Melbourne that could rival those great cities of the world.
So those buildings that we admire today, they're really like a testament to that ambition, that prosperity of the gold rush era. It's like the city itself was trying to reflect that newfound wealth and status.
Exactly. And while those buildings are a visible reminder, the legacy goes even deeper than that. It's woven into Melbourne's character in more subtle ways.
Okay, now you've got me really intrigued. What are some of those less obvious but equally important ways that the gold rush is still influencing Melbourne today?
Think about Melbourne's reputation for innovation and entrepreneurship. That spirit, it could be traced back to the gold rush. It fostered this culture of risk-taking, resourcefulness, believing in opportunity.
I can see that. A gold rush attracted people who were willing to, take a chance. Leave everything they knew behind and chase a dream. That kind of mentality, it had to have had a lasting impact.
Oh, it did. For example, the need for efficient transportation during the gold rush, that led to the development of Australia's very first steam train line. A direct result of that innovative spirit, driven by the demands of the time.
That's a great example. It shows how the gold rush wasn't just about, digging for gold. It was about pushing boundaries, finding new ways to do things, overcoming those challenges. And that spirit, it seems like it's still alive and well in Melbourne.
Oh, absolutely. Melbourne's thriving startup scene that focus on technology and creativity, it all echoes that gold rush mentality. The city's still infused with that energy, that belief in the power of possibility.
It's really amazing how an event that happened over 150 years ago can still be having such a big impact, shaping the character and the trajectory of an entire city.
And speaking of impact, there's one more legacy of the gold rush that I think is worth mentioning. Melbourne's beautiful parks and gardens. Might not seem directly connected to gold mining, but there's a really interesting link there.
Okay, now I'm curious. How did the gold rush lead to, the creation of these peaceful green spaces?
Well, think about it. The city's population was exploding during the gold rush. People started realizing the need for open spaces, places for recreation, for respite. They wanted that connection with nature, especially with all the chaos and the rapid development happening around them. That's what led to the creation of some of Melbourne's most iconic gardens, like the Royal Botanic Gardens and Fitzroy Gardens.
It's incredible to think those peaceful spots that we enjoy today are, well, in a way, a result of the gold rush.
Right.
Just another example of how a historical event can have these unexpected and far-reaching consequences.
You got it, and it really highlights a key point. History, it's not just a static collection of facts, it's this dynamic force that continues to shape our world, often in ways we don't even realize.
And I feel like I'm seeing my own neighborhood, my own city, in a completely new light.
And that's the power of exploring history. It connects us to our surroundings in a way that's deeper, more meaningful. By understanding those forces that shaped our past, we can better understand who we are, where we're going.
So, to everyone listening, we encourage you to explore the history that's all around you. You might be surprised by the stories you uncover, the connections you make. Every street corner, every building, every park, it all holds a piece of the past, just waiting to be discovered.
And remember, the gold rush wasn't just about striking it rich. It was about adventure, resilience, innovation, qualities that still define Melbourne today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Melbourne's gold rush history. We hope you enjoyed the ride.